Good morning, students. In today's session, we will be discussing somatometric measurements from living individual. Now, before starting the session, we will try to understand the introduction behind somatometry. Anthrometry usually refers to measurement of human body. It can further be divided into three categories. It is one, somatometry, which means measurement on living human body. Osteometry, which is measurement on skeletal long and short bones, and cranometry, which is measurement on the skull. The measurement on the living human is usually made by the well-defined anatomical landmarks. Somatometry is highly useful in comparing different populations, designing aircrafts, spaceships, furniture, and uniform to defense and paramilitary personnel. It can also be used for assessment of nutritional status and also to study the effect of intervention. Also, it is highly useful for developing non-invasive markers for diagnosis and to formulate policy and in general to understand the microevolution process as they are reflected in the genetic and the morphological traits in human populations. It has been hypothesized that variation in human dimension is due to interaction of the environment with biological, nutritional, economic, and cultural factors. Now, we will try to understand some of the guidelines that are used before taking the somatometric measurements. These measurements are always recorded in a standard position with minimal clothing, without shoes, and the head of the participant should be in eye to air plane, which is the front foot plane. The measurements are generally made on the right side of the body unless there is evidence of extramuscular, in which case the measurement should be made on the left side. In case of infants or children, measurements can be made by advising them to sit on a stool of 40 centimeters in height. The allowed personal errors that usually is accepted are for head measurement 0.5 to 1 mm, for head height 2 mm, and for most of the body measurement, the permissible error is 3 to 5 mm. Now, we will be discussing the anatomical landmarks. These landmarks are usually defined as any anatomic feature present in tissue that serve to indicate a specific structure or position. There are several landmarks used in somatometry, and some of the landmarks are going to be discussed in this module. Acropodion is the distal point on the toe cap of the first or the second toe. A layer is the later point on the nasal wing. Durion is the later point on the sides of the head. Glabella is the point between the eyebrow ridges above the nasal root. Nathion is the point on the lower margin of the lower jaw at mid-sagittal plane. Gonion is the lowest posterior and most lateral point on the angle of the lower jaw. Enion is the point on the tubercular linear on posterior protuberance in the mid-sagittal plane. Nasion is the point on the nasal root in the mid-sagittal plane. Pronasal is the anterior point on the tip of the nose. Prosthion is the point on the lower margin of the gums of the upper jaw in the mid-sagittal plane. Pterion is the hindmost part on the heel of the stretched foot. Subnasal is the point at the lower margin of the nasal septum that meets the ingument of the upper lip. Tracheon is the point on the upper margin of tragus, which is 1 to 2 centimeters below the helix spine. And zygion is the later point on the zygomatic arch. Now let us discuss some of the measurements that are taken in somatometry, the landmarks, and the instrument that is generally used. The maximum head length is the straight distance between glabella and opisthocrinion. It is usually measured by spreading caliper with blunt end, glabella to enion. It is the length straight distance between the glabella and enion. It is generally used by spreading caliper with blunt end. The maximum head breadth is a straight distance between the two urion and is measured by splitting caliper with blunt end. Minimum frontal breadth is a straight distance between the two frontotemporia, which is measured by taking the splitting caliper with blunt ends. Biauricular breadth or bitrachea breadth is the straight difference between the two trachea and usually is taken by spreading caliper with blunt end. Breadth or bizygomatic arch, which is the straight distance between the two zygia, is measured using spreading caliper with blunt end. And bigonial breadth is the straight distance between the two gonia, which is usually measured by spreading caliper with breadth end. Now, we will be discussing some of the somatometric measurements that are taken from the hand and the feet. From the hand, we consider length of the hand, which is the straight distance between the midpoint of the two lines joining the two stylion and dictylion of the middle finger. This measurement is usually taken from the sliding caliper. Length of the thumb, which is the straight distance between phalangeon 1 of the thumb and dictylion on the same. And this again is measured using sliding caliper. Hand breadth is a straight distance between the metacarpal radius and the metacarpal ulnae, and it is measured by sliding caliper. Length of the foot is a straight different distance between the acropodion and the turnion. This is usually measured from sliding caliper. The breadth of the foot is straight distance between the metatarsal tibulae and metatarsal fibulae and is measured from sliding caliper. Now, we shall be discussing some of the important measurements which are taken with the help of a measuring tape. The first measurement is the chest girth, and this is taken in both inspiration and expiration. The circumference of the chest when breathing normally is taken, and both is recorded in inspiration and expiration. The waist breadth is the circumference of the abdomen at the most lateral contour of the body between the ribs and the intestine. The hip girth is the circumference of the hip at their widest portion. The maximum girth of the upper arm is the circumference of the upper arm at the maximum development of the bicep muscle. The maximum girth of forearm is the maximum circumference of the lower arm under the elbow joint. The least girth of the forearm or the girth of the wrist is the least circumference of the forearm, which is proximal to the styloid process. And the maximum girth of the thigh is the circumference of the lowest point in the gluteal furrow and horizontal to the thigh. The maximum calf girth is circumference where calf muscles are developed. Now, we will be discussing the somatometric measurements which are taken from the nose. These are 1. The nasal breadth, which is a straight distance between the two layers of the nose. It is taken by the sliding caliper with flat arm. The nasal height is straight distance between the nasion and the subnasal and is measured from sliding caliper with flat arm. The nasal depth is the projective distance between the tip of the nasal is the projected distance between the tip of the nose and the hindmost part of the nasal septum and is usually measured by sliding caliper with flat arm. The nasal length, also known as the length of the nose, is a straight distance between nasion and pronasal and it is measured using the sliding caliper with flat arm. Now, we're going to be discussing some of the important somatometric measurements taken from the face. These includes physiognomic facial height, which is a straight distance between the trichion and the natrion and is usually measured from the sliding caliper. Then comes the morphological facial height or the total facial height, which is the straight distance between the nasion and the natrion. And this measurement is taken using a sliding caliper. Then we have the physiognomic upper facial height, which is a straight distance between the nasion and the stomion and is usually measured from the sliding caliper. The morphological upper face height is the straight distance between the meson and the procyon and is measured using the sliding caliper. With this, we have come to an end to the module on somatometry. Hope you like this video.